Israeli media often refers to the hostages as slain, that Hamas killed them. However, just last week we saw Israeli hostages in respect to the Palestinian resistance fighters kissing their forehead before being released. How does this act of solidarity contradict the narrative being pushed by Israeli media about Hamas?
Well, the eyes don't lie, do they? And when you see emotional reactions, personal human relationships between an Israeli soldier or a prisoner of war with his or her captors, which is so intimate, because they were very intimate, some of those gestures, in terms of, gratitude and love and just the sense of, you could see there was a sort of rapport, a relationship that must have built up in order for that to happen. These men were behind masks, and yet they recognized them, and they were very thankful to them. That caused a massive problem for the Israeli Hasbara, because the whole point was that they were meant to come out and get the opposite reaction. They were meant to be able to tell the world how bad Hamas were, and how evil the Palestinian resistance is, and how terroristic they are, because that's what they are. They're proscribed here in the West, all of these organizations now. But what we saw and what the world is seeing is quite the opposite. They're seeing the reverse. And then, of course, they're comparing it to that ghastly description that I gave of the poor Palestinian prisoners, many of whom have come out raped, emaciated, starved, beaten, tortured mentally, tortured physically. The kind of techniques that we've seen on videos, and the world is seeing these videos of Israeli soldiers and Israeli, prison guards as they frog march, put truncheons into the private parts of some of the Palestinians. I even have seen horrific scenes, and those have all been verified now. They're not things which are they're not things which are conjecture. They're actual reality. So I think that this is all turned on its head. Of course, there's still a very powerful Anglo-Zionist media, as my colleague Mr. Gosling was saying earlier, that they absolutely correctly that there's a massive campaign even now to try and cover up these crimes, to try and dehumanize Palestinians, while at the same time totally humanizing the Israelis. So in Western newspapers, what you'll see is all of these hostages will be named. There'll be human stories told about them. Their parents, their families will all be involved in the interviews. You'll see them an in-depth analysis of each one of these Palestinian hostages, as they keep putting it. And so that's all done deliberately to counteract these scenes, as you described, of the kind of very fraternal, very loving exchanges that happen on the release of many of these Israeli prisoners. So you can see there's a big thing going on to try and win the hearts and minds. But I think the Israelis have lost that war overall. The world knows, the people know. The governments can lie as much as they like. The Western media can throw out as much nonsense as they like. The only thing they're relying on is that there's a large proportion of the Western public who are now more concerned about their own problems here, because of course the economic problems that are kicking off here are also concerning people a lot. So that's another way of distracting people from worrying about what's going on in Gaza, because it's miles away. And okay, so what? There's a genocide. I've got to pay my bills. That kind of attitude can still prevail as a priority for ordinary people, because it's their ordinary lives here. That's what they're relying on. So I think there's a big battle. The soft power war is very important, and I don't think that Hamas or either resistance, etc., have invested in a huge amount of soft power exercises. Although the way they've released these prisoners has given the world the opportunity definitely see that there's something going on which was positive, but that war is really important to win. Let's see, the more I think Israelis are going to win.
Thank you, Mr. Abbas. Mr. Gosling, yesterday marked the anniversary of Aaron Bushnell, who selflessly set himself on fire for the cause of Palestine, hoping that one day his ashes would be spread on a free Palestine. What are your thoughts on his act of sacrifice first, and how do you see the current prisoners exchange deal playing into the idea of a free Palestine?
Well, Aaron Bushnell's, the way it was reported here, it wasn't reported much, but was a sort of head-scratching exercise as to what was he doing, why would he do it. Actually, of course, it was, well, an incredibly courageous act of somebody who feels at their wits' end when it comes to upholding international law as part of their military service. Now, there are a sizable number of people that when they join the military, they believe that what they're doing is they're fighting for just causes. Of course, that's going to be a bit of a delusion within much of the Western military, but this is, it's all about morale. And when someone joins the army, a soldier like Aaron, and realizes that actually they are the bad guys, they are doing the wrong thing, that they are killing innocent, they're helping to kill innocent people. I mean, the US role, I think, in Gaza is mainly an intelligence role, so helping them with targeting, helping the Israelis to jointly develop software to kill and target families of Palestinians, but that doesn't mean to say that those involved in the military intelligence side of things in the United States are not aware of their role. And I think as people start to think their way through what they're doing in the military, this can be quite a horrifying and frightening thing. So for somebody like Aaron, they have several choices. So one of them is just simply to leave the military. Another one is to just go along with it and try and turn a blind eye to the evil that they're part of. But you can be sure that any kind of armed force that fights like that, the morale is very low. Very low. Mm-hmm. The only way to keep the morale up is to lie to people, to lie to the soldiers, and to try and convince them that somehow this is the right thing, God wants you to do this. So this is the role of Christian Zionism, a very pernicious form of Christianity, which is really no real relation to Christianity, which says that this is all God's will. Well, of course, the whole reason the Zionist movement started was because God wasn't actually creating a Jewish state in Palestine, and so the secular political Zionists decided they would do it because God was taking too long, and this is the only way I think that the Christian Zionists can bamboozle people in the US forces into really believing what they're doing is right, and that's quite an important factor in all of this. But for many people who maybe have not so much faith in this crazy Christian Zionism, they will be thinking, let's walk away. But what Aaron did was incredibly brave. He sacrificed his own life for his principles and for what he saw as upholding the United States Constitution and international law all rolled into one. So that's why what he did was so important, and that's why it was rather poo-pooed in the Western press, what he did.
Absolutely. Mr. Abbas, my final question, why are Palestinian prisoners celebrated as heroes upon their release, while Israeli captives are not given the same kind of recognition?
Palestinians are fighting for a just cause. It's quite clear after the amount of sacrifice and death and suffering and all that we've seen rolled out, especially over the last 15 months, but go back 7 decades, and it's been going on incessantly. After all that, you realize that actually these prisoners are part of a people who are probably the most resilient, the most courageous, the most kind of stoic, the most honorable, and the most dignified. people that I can imagine. I mean, to be honest with you, I mean, I've been, of course, supporting the Palestinian cause since I was a child growing up here in London, and to see them go through all this and still at the end, in the face of bombs, missiles, cholera, malnutrition, starvation, dogs eating bodies in the street. I've seen things like that. They've seen these things as eyewitnesses. The fact that children must have been buried alive, and God knows how many days they were under that rubble and died slowly. You know, when you think about all that and you realize just what these people have gone through, and these prisoners are a part of that body of human beings, which I think represent the most noble among us. And I think that we all feel a sense of respect and a sense of humility when you see these people, what they're willing to go through in order to just make the statement about the simple notion of freedom, dignity, and having their own, equality of rights. I think that that's a big thing. And, it shames the rest of the world, really, seeing what they're willing to do. It's not just for a piece of land. The land is symbolic in the sense that it's the soil which feeds them, and they value it on that basis. They have an intimate relationship with the land, which is different from the kind of relationship that we have in the West or many other materialist nations. Their connection with the land is ancestral. It's where their family's blood is. It's where their flesh and bones are buried. It has an attachment which is kind of really heartening. It's an old school. It's a sort of almost a divinely linked kind of connection to the earth. Whereas what we have is much more disposable. So I think on so many levels, in terms of the lifestyle, the virtue ethics that these people are showing, all of those things that I mentioned, courage, honor, dignity, justice, the values which we all pretend we work for and love, most of us, but actually go against. Well, the Palestinians have shown this, and every time I see them, these prisoners are an example of it, because it's one thing to die and you're dead, that's it. It's another thing to get injured because you suffer for your life, all the mental injuries and the trauma that's going to go on. But then these prisoners go into the hands of the very people who hate them on a level where it's unimaginable how much they hate them, how fascist they are. And then these people are at the mercy of these tyrants, day in, day out, locked away where the world can't see them, and those monsters can do anything they like to them, and they terrorize them, and yet they go through it with dignity, and they come out of it, and they are still head held high, and they're proud, and they've gone through it. There is no level of respect that you could give to people who have gone through this at every level. So, that's why I think the world whose eyes are open recognize that the Palestinians are something special. They're the best of humanity at the moment, without a doubt in my mind.
That's right. Thank you so much, both of our guests, Tony Gosling, historian and investigative journalist, joining us from Bristol, and Sayed Mohsen Abbas, journalist and political analyst, joining us from London. And with that brings us to the end of this edition of a special coverage. If anything comes up, we'll let you know. Thank you so much, and bye-bye.